Welcome back to the Spicy Take Sports Podcast. I'm Elijah. With me of Caleb and Colton. And first off, we want to apologize for a little bit of a delay on the second podcast post. I was up in Atlanta actually with Colton. That made it really difficult to actually record. But
It probably is.
Because of that, we kind of have a little bit of a delay. But we're going to get to the fantasy football stuff today. We're going to talk about a little bit of the recap of what happened in college today. So we're recording this at 10 o'clock on Saturdays. So could be some changes, but there's been some really big things that happened so far. And then we're going to get to some NFL news that happened this week that could be really big for the season. And then our upsets, pick of the week, and then the game of the week for the NFL as well. So I just want to first start out with some NCAA recap. The number one thing, obviously, has been Oregon pulling off the win against Ohio State. Obviously, only a 7-point victory, but it felt a lot more dominant.
It was interesting because you look at the stats with 269 rushing yards for Oregon, and everyone thought coming into that game that Ohio State was going to roll all over Oregon's defense too, because they were missing Thibodeau and they're one of their starting linebackers too. So I was a little surprised that Ohio State couldn't play more of a ball control game and kind of keep that down, because usually when you have two teams that both are capable of running the ball, the team that can pass more is still going to be able to pull out the win in the end, because you run the ball, and then finally just blow it up through the air. And when the other team isn't able to get a third down, you've immediately lost a key chance to score. So I was a little surprised that ground control game worked so well for Oregon. Just kept them in the game all game long.
Yeah, and up until the fourth quarter, I mean, Oregon had basically a 2-touchdown lead for a good chunk of the game. I mean, up until Ohio State scored 2 touchdowns late to try to pull it within one. I mean, I was at the Georgia game, so I wasn't really able. And Georgia, yeah, close game. But so, yeah, Ohio State, I just didn't think they were all that great this year. And I mean, maybe Oregon's a little better than we expected, but I don't know. They kind of struggled with Fresno State last week at the same time, so it's kind of hard to gauge, early on this season who's who. So
Oregon might start becoming like offensive line university. Like, they're consistently putting offensive linemen into the league that go on and have long careers. They might not be like superstars necessarily, although, I mean, they just had a guy drafted in the top 10 last year, so it's hard to say that they don't do anything like that. But I'm kind of interested to see who takes that on. And teams that have good offensive lines in college football are so rare. It's Alabama and a couple other ones that consistently are getting the 5 stars. So if you can manage to pull like a solid offensive line out of your particular recruiting pipeline, it gives you a chance to win every single year, no matter anything else.
Yeah, like your Georgia, your Alabama, your Clemson's, like they're about almost 2, feels like sometimes 3 deep at O-line in terms of 4 or 5 stars, like high 4 stars, 5 stars, which, it gives you a nice boost and allows you to, with the player pretty much develop themselves and then go to the league. So, I mean, Ohio State's, I guess, kind of in the same category, but this year, maybe just with a true freshman quarterback,
New starting center too, because our starting center for the Packers now was their second-round pick now last year out of Ohio State. That's a bigger deal than you'd think. I read an interesting article that was talking about how important the center is in college, because so many college quarterbacks, particularly in spread offenses, can't read defenses, and they actually call on the center to do more reading than the quarterback. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I guess if they're younger quarterbacks, like true freshmen, are definitely going to rely on their play callers. And as we speak, Texas only has 2 minutes left in the game. They're down by 19 points. So they're going to fall to Arkansas. So
Texas is back.
Texas, every year they say they're back and they're never back. So they're kind of like Tennessee in my eyes. I mean, they're usually get a little hype going this season and then they just collapse. Second, third week in, they already collapse. So,
I mean, I think that Texas is one of those things where there's a lot of hype last week after they beat Louisiana, which Louisiana is not a bad team. But when you come out for the start of the year with a new coach, you're going to come out as hot as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And if that's the best we can get from a Texas, which is not looking good here with them probably going to lose to Arkansas here. It's going to be rough. I mean, Arkansas could be a better team this year that everyone expected them to be, but they're probably still a bottom feeder in the SEC comparatively. I mean, and it's going to be tough to see. Going back on the Ohio State-Oregon game.
Yeah.
You Colton said something about Fresno State almost beat him Oregon beat last week. I think that really brings the question up. What is Oregon is good? Are they better than we thought they were? Is Ohio State worse than we thought they were? Or is Fresno State better than we thought they were? And Oregon's about what we thought they were at first.
I don't know Fresno State enough to answer that question. But.
I mean, Fresno has been a top 10 group of 5 program the last 5-6 years. So I mean,
they produce some good talent out of Fresno State. I mean, Devontae Adams, obviously from the Packers, from Fresno State. Derek Carr from Fresno State. I mean, they've had some. I mean, obviously there's numerous amounts of other guys, but those are the two that popped in my mind immediately that made an impact in the NFL. So, I mean, they produce talent sometimes, but I mean, yeah, I don't. I think it's a little bit of Fresno's better than usual, and Ohio State's a little down more so than usual. Mm-hmm. So I think Oregon. I think they're a good team. Will they be in the top 4 at the end of the year? Possibly.
Ohio State could be one of those teams that they start out like really rough, and then by the time you get to like week 4 or 5, they're starting to gel and click, and all those new starters and everything. Like, I think we've been a little bit pampered watching like Alabama just roll in a new 11 starters pretty much every single year because they're all getting drafted, and everyone just kind of assumes, oh, well, I mean, if they can do it, why don't everyone? But I mean, you've got an entire coaching staff that could be coaching in the NFL, you know what I mean, in Alabama. So not every team and just not every player either necessarily just rolls into his new thing and is like, oh, yes, I'm just comfortable here instantly. It takes a little bit of time. And the more big games that you have earlier in the season, the more likely you are to trip up.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, not trying to like focus too much on Georgia, but like Kirby Smart like always emphasizes like pressure is a privilege in terms of like, you know, college programs. They try to play the big games, and it's so you test yourself early. And I mean, you'll know where you're at instead of, you know, sometimes being uncertain playing like patsy teams early on.
Kirby's got that Alabama lineage, so.
Yeah, exactly. He was doing that from Saban to schedule the big games immediately. I mean, I feel like that's the best. If you can win those games, that's the best way to do it. But when you lose, you don't look so smart. But I mean, I guess you just have to bank on your team winning.
Yeah. The other positive to it, because it's now in the playoff scenario, is, I mean, no one obviously knows what goes on behind closed doors, but you got to think that if you lose earlier in the year, it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind. So like say Ohio State, now they've lost here week 1 or week 2. If they go on and reel off straight wins all the way to the end of the year, and they're talking and the committee's talking about who to pit in the college football playoff championship, if some other team has lost in like week 9, week 10, week 11, that's a lot more of a fresh memory. You just remember downgrading them in your rankings or whatever. Ohio State has just been looking strong. So getting a loss earlier, I feel like, is a little bit better for your chances to be highly ranked anyway, because teams or prognosticators just see that arrow pointing up and they don't remember necessarily as well the loss.
Yeah, I mean, when it gets to the end of the year, you're going to have, especially with a specific loss. I mean, I think a lot of the reasons people are really taking shots, a lot of Ohio State, because going into the year, this is considered one of the top games of the year to begin with. So it was not really going to be too much of a shock if either team won. A big thing is that Thibodeau was out, and that was everyone kind of wrote off Oregon at that point. At the end of the year, you're not going to really remember that. And I could see if CJ Stroud gets his footing under them, and then the defensive starters that are new get to playing better, then they could easily make a run. What I do think they could be, I think they've got all kinds of talent, but they're such a young team. They remind me a little bit of the Sam Darnold USC team from 2016, his freshman year, when they started out like, what was it, 4-2, 4-3, something like that. And they reeled off like 5 or 6 straight wins at the end of the year, into 10-3, and were arguably the best team in the country at the end of the year. Because they won that Rose Bowl game against Penn State in a game that literally was the best game of the year. So, I mean, that could be what this Ohio State team turns into. I know Ohio State fans want more than that, because you don't want to just be hot at the end of the year. You want to actually make a chance for the playoff. But I could easily see that being what this team is, because they've got talent all across the board. But how much is the young talent going to kill them? Because I think, as you said, you have teams like Alabama that rolls in new starters. You have teams like Clemson where Trevor Lawrence comes in a freshman and wins the championship. We've kind of gotten spoiled with all of these freshman quarterbacks coming in and putting a stamp on on college football like that, when we forget that there wasn't a single freshman quarterback. There wasn't a single freshman to win a Heisman other than Johnny Manziel. And that was
Johnny
8 years ago.
he was the first. Yeah, he was the first freshman to win the Heisman, and then Baker was the first walk-on to win the Heisman, which is absolutely incredible to think about it. But at the same time, I mean, he's just one of those special players that you don't really see often.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
another thing that I was thinking about is just to kind of comment on the Ohio State thing. Ohio State will go as far as that defense takes them. I think that offense will be able to score points. I don't know if it'll be able to put points up at will necessarily, but they'll be able to put up points. But it's that defense that's looking really leaky right now.
So can we make a spicy take about Ohio State losing to Michigan this year? You think that'd be super, super spicy? You don't think that's going to happen?
I think my spicy take is that they lose to Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. If I was,
I agree with that spicy take.
Going off of that, I am super high on Iowa now. I didn't know what to think of at the beginning of the year, but if you come out in the year and you beat a team that people thought really high of in Indiana, and then you go out and you beat Iowa State, you don't do it just by a little bit. You beat them both convincingly, and both of those two teams were very highly thought of by a lot of people. And in our first episode, I said that Iowa Indiana games are say a lot about Indiana. I did not know how much I was going to say about Iowa. That said a lot, but then when you see what they did at Iowa State this morning, that's impressive.
Yeah, Iowa State's a pretty good team too. I mean, some people project them to make the playoff, and
yeah,
it was the final score was 27-17 in Ames and Iowa State. I mean,
Iowa had a bigger lead than that most of the game too.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa State just pulled it a little closer at the end, make it not look as bad, but I mean, it was a dominant game.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Notre Dame is one of the most overrated teams in the country right now. Notre Dame escaped a 3-point victory against Toledo, literally. I thought they were going to lose that game. But they pulled it off. But still, a win's a win. But I mean, Florida State's struggling with Jacksonville State right now. So I mean, Notre Dame should have potentially lost to Florida State. Really,
Florida State start McKenzie today.
I think they did, yeah. I mean, they're winning right now, but they're struggling for a while until like midway through the third.
That was still the story of the season so far, was McKenzie. Like, that was awesome to see. I think everyone was kind of rooting for Florida State there at the end.
Yeah, I'm not a huge. I mean, I don't really mind Florida State, but like for him to come out and play as well as he did and lead them, come back. They weren't going to come back to the game without Milton. I mean, it was just kind of like an awesome story to see, as you said.
Yeah. Like I despise Florida State. I was rooting for them to win there at the end, or for Milton to play as well as possible, which I guess would constitute to a win. So,
yeah, that's the main things of college football. It's been kind of eventful with the Ohio State, Oregon, and the Iowa State, and then Texas just got their butts kicked by Arkansas officially, 40-21.
That's the ball game.
Something before we move to the NFL, just really quickly, something that I'd like to bring up for viewers to think about, that I'd like to talk about this coming week, is Florida put in their backup quarterback. I was just finding this out. Florida put in their backup quarterback, and Anthony Richardson ended up running for, 115 yards on 4 rushes, and he went 3 for 3 for 152 yards and 2 touchdowns. And now they're talking about like a quarterback controversy, and this is Alabama week for Florida. So kind of interested if you viewers want to comment on it here on the Twitter channel or anything like that. If you think that Florida is going to roll with 4th-year starter Emory Jones going into Alabama, or are they going to try out this new redshirt freshman and put him in there and see what he can do? Because it kind of seems like you're going with like the safe floor option versus like the high risk, high reward, but it's Alabama week, and you're not going to win anyway, probably, unless you have some kind of crazy luck or crazy game from your starters. So, I mean, I would personally roll with the redshirt freshman, see what he can do. And then after that, decide.
I would do the same. I mean,
do you have nothing to lose?
Yeah, I mean, what have we seen from Emory Jones in general to show he has any chance to be Alabama? Like, and I don't even know if he's at the lowest floor because we haven't seen Emory Jones do anything. And at least we see Richardson at least shows a lot of talent.
Emory can run the triple option well. That's about it.
Yeah, your triple option with those Alabama athletes, it's not going to work very well.
No.
Go over there to Navy, I guess, if you wanted to play triple option all day.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Richardson would kind of give Alabama fits. I mean, that's probably one of the best ways to beat Alabama is a running quarterback. Just think about the players that have defeated Nick Saban. I mean, Joe Burrow is an exception because him and the offense were ridiculous. But in terms of like Johnny Manziel, I mean, like Cam Newton obviously was a dual threat.
The guy from
those
Auburn,
guys are
what was that guy's name? The Miracle, the Iron Bowl Miracle.
Nick Marshall.
Nick Marshall,
yeah. Nick Marshall. He was a defensive back at Georgia and then went and played quarterback at Auburn. And they led him to the national championship. That was a crazy year for Auburn. Two of the luckiest plays I've ever seen, basically back-to-back games. But yeah, I would go with like high risk, high reward. I mean, you're more than likely not going to beat Alabama. I mean, just go for it. Last year Florida. I mean, that contrast granted, but I mean they were the closest team to beating Alabama realistically. I mean, they only lost by 6 points.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Florida. I mean, obviously Florida is one of the most premier programs in the SEC, but it's gonna be interesting. It's in Gainesville, so that makes the game really interesting. If it was in Tuscaloosa, I wouldn't be as confident Florida has a chance. But
yeah,
I mean, what about Penn State and Auburn? I mean, I think that game's interesting. Auburn, I mean, granted they haven't really played anyone, but they've looked pretty sound. I mean, they didn't really make any mistakes.
I think Bo Nix has made like quantifiable jumps every single year he started. I watched that Penn State versus Wisconsin game. It was one of the ugliest games I have ever watched in my entire life. Like, I know it's week one and everything like that, but I mean, come on, you got fans back in the stands and you had wide receivers running wide open on that Wisconsin defense who was trying to blitz constantly, and the quarterback was just missing, and not because he was under pressure. The blitzes were getting picked up. He was just whiffing. I mean, you can't do that against an SEC team consistently. I don't care if it's Missouri. You can't do that on an SEC team consistently. They'll make you pay. So I think that'll be more of a blowout than people think. But
yeah, I mean, could that be a bit of a spicy take because Auburn's 25th and Penn State's 11th? I mean, Penn State is probably going to be favored in that game. It's in Happy Valley, which is a hard place to play. I mean, I would probably pick Auburn to win, honestly, but
I pick Auburn by like 10.
That's fair.
I guess that is a spicy take. I don't know. I didn't even know that. I just figured that every SEC team is like favored on a near weekly basis unless they play interconference. But
yeah, I mean, literally, they're usually more highly ranked. But Penn State, I guess they beat Wisconsin, who was ranked, and then maybe someone else that was pretty decent. But I mean, it'll be interesting. I sort of agree. I mean, Auburn is obviously they're one of those programs that can beat anyone and almost lose anyone. Elijah, you got anything?
I mean, kind of the same. I'll believe the Bo Nix hype when I see it. There's a lot of people trying to hype him up again. I believe when I see it. I mean, people hyped him up after he beat out Joey Gatewood, and Joey Gatewood's now in his third college. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I believe in him against a Big Ten team, but I want to see how he plays when he comes back in SEC play. I mean, I think as Caleb said, I think that he can potentially get it done in Happy Valley. But once he gets back in the bulk of SEC schedule, it's gonna be a whole different ballgame. But y'all boys want to roll on to NFL now?
Let's do it.
Yeah, so I want to go into fantasy football. Of course, we all had our drafts this past week. And, of course, we had the really good game between Tampa and Dallas, a little controversial, but definitely saw a lot of fantasy guys that we didn't know really what we're going to get from them. Antonio Brown looked fantastic. Chris Godwin was very good.
Chris Godwin's
CeeDee
on my
Lamb was
fantasy
great.
teams. He
Huh?
looked really good. I said Chris Godwin's on one of my fantasy teams. I think in our league, and he played really well. He got me about 23 points.
Yeah. I left AB on the bench because I had Devontae and Cooper Kupp, but I'm not sure that was such a smart decision in the end. So
I mean, if AB plays like that, Tampa's going to be tough to beat. I mean, you're going to have 3 top 15 receivers in the league on the same roster.
I heard recently there was rumors coming out of camp right for I guess a couple days before the game started that Brady and others say AB looks like the old AB.
that's what I read. That's why I drafted him in I think I got him in the 9th, 10th round or something like that. I was like, that's the same value that I see in like people who are picking Julio Jones in like the 6th or 7th. I mean, that's just insane. Sure, he's 32, but all of his injuries have been like
ankle
stuff and just things that I don't think will sap him. Like he's 32. I think he's just as athletic as he ever was. I mean, she's probably a little past his prime, but
I think he's past his prime, but he's still Julio Jones. I mean, can you say he's a top 10 receiver all time? I mean, just skill wise, just as a receiver.
I think it's fair. The only thing that I question about that is his touchdown numbers, and I don't know if that's really a fair thing. That's kind of like saying quarterback or Super Bowl wins are a quarterback stat. Yeah, like as a wide receiver, what you get thrown to you is what you get thrown to. So
right. Yeah, I mean, what you produce from the ball in your hands. I mean, that's all you can do.
I mean, he has one of the lowest drop rates in NFL history. He has one of the highest catch percentages just in general. And then, I mean, the only thing would be the touchdowns or the injuries. But I mean, even then, I mean, people consider Megatron like that. Megatron consistently missed 3 to 4 games a year because of stuff. And then he'd play hurt half the time. So.
Yeah, I mean, he was an absolute freak of nature. Definitely one of the most exciting receivers I've ever seen. But yeah, I mean, one guy I'm really high on that's actually have on fantasy that I'm looking forward to actually watching in person tomorrow is Calvin Ridley. I just think, with him being wide receiver 1, which also I guess will open up Kyle Pitts. I mean, the rookie. I mean, maybe they're going to double Ridley. I'm not sure.
I was kind of wondering about Atlanta's number 2 wide receiver, Russell Gage. I was looking at picking him up. I think he got drafted, but I was looking at picking him up. And if, you always want to buy low, sell high. So if Ridley goes off in week 1, but if I see that Gage has high enough usage numbers where he's on the field often enough and stuff, then I would think about trying to trade for him early enough and see what happens there, because I could see him being viable.
I mean, he could get that volume that Ridley. I mean, he's not the player that Ridley is, but I mean, he's good. Russell Gage is above average in my opinion. I mean, he's not also superstar, but at the same time, he's gonna get quite a bit of volume because I mean, obviously now Julio's gone. It's gonna kind of all transition over, but it's interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, my question about that, because I know you're a fan of it. So are you worried at all about Ridley's health? I mean, he's kind of a skinny little guy. Do you worry about him kind of being a number 1, or do you think that he'll hold up for a 17-game season?
I think he may miss a game or 2 just based off maybe he may need rest here and there. I mean, I think he can carry the bulk of being wide receiver 1, but I think Pitts is going to take some of the receptions away from Ridley, which I think Ridley is still going to be, maybe a top 10 fantasy receiver. I think he's going to be that good this season. But, I mean, I just think Pitts is going to be an issue. I mean, I just saw some highlights in camp that I really liked. So, as a Falcons fan, not trying to be too biased, I think Pitts is going to be good. I don't think he's going to be as good as everyone's saying he's going to be his rookie season because he's a rookie. But, you being a Florida fan, I mean, you got to see him firsthand. So, I mean,
yeah,
you got to see things in college.
His skills translate well. I mean, that's the thing. And on top of that, everyone always talks about that transition from tight end to the NFL. Like Hawkinson had a rough transition in Detroit and stuff, and people got mad. But that's because he was traditional inline tight end. I mean, tight ends who have made an easy transition in the NFL are people like Jimmy Graham. I mean, Jimmy Graham wasn't superstar in his first year, but he produced. I could see Kyle Pitts easily getting in the 750 yards, 7 touchdowns range. That wouldn't be crazy at all. I don't think he's going to I'd be surprised if he's pushing 1,000, but at the same time, I don't think it would be crazy either.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible at the same time. So we'll see how it goes.
I mean, I don't like Mike Davis at running back for Atlanta. So I think that Matt Ryan is going to throw his arm out, throwing it all over the field. So
Yeah, as he has the last like 4 years. He hasn't really had a running game since he went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, since Devontae Freeman.
Yeah, since Freeman and Coleman duo. But
So I just want to get into when it comes to your fantasy teams, we all had a few teams. I just want to talk about from all your teams combined. I think we mostly know who we drafted in these leagues. Who is the guy you're most excited to see? Who do you think is the steal you all got? And who do you think was a guy that was consistently going way higher in your drafts than you think they should have? I mean, I can start. I mean, the guy I'm most excited about, Antonio Gibson, I feel like is going to be absolutely a stud. Any PPR league out there, I feel like he's just going to absolutely destroy it. He's the best receiving back in football when it comes to actually just straight up hands. I mean, he was a receiver, and he just somehow is an athletic freak at running back as well. So I'm really excited about him. I have him in, I think, all three of my leagues. Then a guy I think I got a really good deal on. I think Tyler Lockett's been falling in a lot of drafts a little bit too far. And I think he's probably a top 10-ish receiver. And the fact he's falling, I mean, I got him in the 7th and 8th rounds of a couple of my drafts. So, I mean, I'm like, when I'm seeing him down there, I'm kind of excited about that. I mean, I know I've been personally crushed by Tyler Lockett the last like 2 years in fantasy. Every time I face him, for some reason, he goes off. And then I think that a guy that's been going really high, he's going a little bit lower than he has been in previous years. I think that you're seeing a lot of people take Odell Beckham still like in the top 5 or 6 rounds of the draft. And personally, I don't think he's that receiver anymore. I think the injuries that he's had are getting to him. And also think that he just doesn't, the offense isn't great in Cleveland for him specifically. And also, I mean, one other guy, I just don't personally like taking quarterbacks high at all to begin with. And I'm seeing a lot of people take Josh Allen 2nd round. And I think he's going to have a good year. But my thing is, do you think you're going to get that much more production from a Josh Allen than you would from, say, a 7th round Joe Burrow or someone like that? But
yeah, I mean, a lot of fantasy experts recommend actually that you stream your quarterback. I mean, I did that for a couple of years and won a couple of leagues doing that. It kind of can burn you sometimes, so I wouldn't like 100% straight up recommend it. But if you're outside that top realm of, I've got Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, Mahomes and Allen. Outside of that, I mean, there's going to be weeks where if you just keep your starter in because you're stubborn, because you drafted him, you honestly could do better with something on the waiver wire, unless you're like in a 16-team league. If you're in a 16-team league, then yeah, maybe you just keep your starter in all the time. Maybe at that point you draft 2 quarterbacks, so you have some choice. But I mean, I think I my personal rule is never take a quarterback before the 6th round. So if I find someone that I think is a permanent starter in the 6th round, great, good for me. But like in the league that we're all in, I ended up with Jalen Hurts, and I think I got him in the 11th round. I like Jalen Hurts, and I think he has a high floor because of that running, but I also am not really sure how high of his ceiling is either. So I drafted Joe Burrow in the 12th because I think Joe Burrow has a high ceiling with all that passing and how much he's going to have to come from behind in Cincinnati. So, I mean, he was in the top 10 quarterbacks in the weeks that he played until he tore his ACL. So, and he's a young guy. I don't think he'll have trouble coming back from that. So,
a guy that I think people are kind of not taken high enough in the drafts I've seen that I kind of snagged. And I believe I snagged in 2 of my drafts out of 4. Marquez Callaway. I mean, he's gonna be wide receiver 1 in New Orleans until Mike Thomas is back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've seen the catches he made in preseason. Really high on him. And someone that everyone took really high in my drafts was Calvin Ridley. I mean, I took Ridley and one of them, but I mean, some people were taking him with their 1st or 2nd pick, or their 1st pick.
Something that I've seen going high. I mean, I suppose it's normal, but I'm surprised to see 32-year-old Travis Kelce be a recommended top 8 pick.
Same.
Yeah.
He's a tight end. I just don't. It's another thing there. It's a position that you're not going to keep multiple players on the roster and everything, really. You kind of just roll with the one. And I don't know if I could justify that over a top running back, particularly. I mean, if Kelce was ranked like 14 or something like that, I could see that more. I definitely think Kelce should be taken in the second round because he's like a number one wide receiver, basically. But he's getting up there in age. I just wonder how that's going to work out in a 17-game season. And then when you add in the fact that everyone's drafting him so high, and if you take Kelce, you're inevitably messing up your running back 2 or your wide receiver 2, one of those 2 at minimum. So if you do that, he has to produce really well as either your wide receiver 1, or he has to produce like a running back 1 or a running back 2, whichever one you decided to wait until round 3 to go after.
Yeah, I go really heavy art running back to begin with in almost all my drafts, unless there's a guy like a receiver that's fallen or whatever. I personally would never take Kelce in the first couple of rounds. I understand he's a really great player and all that, but for me, I think tight end and quarterback are the 2 positions that a lot of people take really high that I wait on. Like in one of my leagues, it was only a 10-team league, but in one of my leagues, I was able to pick up was Mike Gesicki and Noah Fant, who were both top 8 tight ends in fantasy last year, and got them in I think it was the 12th and 13th rounds. And I would rather do that for sure and get a guy like a Jonathan Taylor or a Terry McLaurin or whoever round you're taking him in. Like I was able to I passed on a Travis Kelce to get Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin, like guys like that.
Yeah.
So I would much rather do that than I would do take a tight end. I get that tight ends. I get that George Kittle and Travis Kelce are top tier tight end. They're the top 2 tight ends in the league. But are they really
Darren Waller
that
would
much?
like a word.
Darren Waller's up there too, yeah. But are those guys really that much better than your next tier compared to your running backs? Because once you get through that running back 1 and running back 2, if you're starting a rotational running back, your carries are very your floor and your ceiling are both way lower than they probably should be. Compared to if you start a starting tight end, maybe you're going to get 6 or 7 points from tight end, but you're not expecting too much from that spot.
Yeah. And I mean, this might be a discussion for next year if we do some kind of like pre-fantasy football season discussion things. But I mean, the biggest advice that I can say is when you see, someone like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes come off the board, start licking your chops, because people are going to get worried that their favorite fantasy quarterback is going to go and everyone's going to start drafting them. 2 of the drafts that I've been in out of my 3, quarterbacks started going in the 3rd round like hot potatoes. I ended up with Terry McLaurin in the 3rd round because everyone decided to take quarterbacks. I mean, I'll take Terry McLaurin any day of the week and roll with roll with Jalen Hurts or Joe Burrow or something like that. That's way more valuable to me than whatever points that particularly any non-running quarterback. Josh Allen's valuable because he gets all this extra running stuff, and same thing with Kyler. But drafting Aaron Rodgers in the 3rd round, I'm a Packers fan. I would never do that. I'd never think about that in a million years. He's a 38-year-old. He's slow. Why would you ever do that?
Yeah, I think I'm drafting like maybe 5th or 6th round, just because I know his production. Like I know he's gonna get me at least 18, 19, 20 points. And a player like Aaron Rodgers. At the same time, like someone I'm worried about that's in my league with Elijah, who's like my RB2, is Austin Eckler. He's already questionable in week 1.
I had him and Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year, and they both screwed me. So,
I mean, I think a lot of fantasy is sometimes a crapshoot. I mean, with the injuries and stuff, there's certain guys that you just have that are just consistently injury prone. I mean, in the league when he was drafting he picked him and he got him in the midway through the 2nd round, which is good value for him if he stays healthy. Especially in a PPR. I mean, in a PPR, he's going to be an RB1 if he can stay healthy. But that's a big but for them.
That's a very big but, yeah.
I mean, so last question about the fantasy stuff. Which of the teams that you have is probably your favorite that you have? And then for what reason? Like in general, doesn't have to be a specific player, but like I know for me, my personal favorite was probably the one that I have with Caleb. I don't usually take quarterback in the top 5 rounds. I took him in the 5th in this one. Kyler was there in the 5th round, and I mean, if you watched last episode's predictions, I'm really high in Arizona, really high on Kyler. I think he's an MVP dark horse. And so I got him in the 5th round, but then also I had a running back duo, Jonathan Taylor and Antonio Gibson, and I was picking 9th. And if that's with that pick, I'm not going to ever complain about that, especially when I was able to get Terry McLaurin in the 3rd round. Like that trio, I'm super excited about. And then also the dark horse pick on that team, which is why I'm kind of excited, I know it kind of contradictory because I do have Jonathan Taylor. I did get Nyheim Hines in that draft as well. They just extended him.
3 years, $27 million.
3 years, $27 million, which you don't give a running back that kind of money unless you're wanting to use him in a very interesting way, especially when you got a guy like Jonathan Taylor that looked so good at the end of the year last year. That either it could be very scary for me as a Jonathan Taylor owner with that, or it could be that they're going to use Nyheim Hines as a receiver / running back dual combo type of guy. He can end up being an Antonio Gibson 2.0, and I could be sitting here rocking 3 of the best running backs in the league. So I'm kind of excited about that league.
Yeah. So I mean, I have 3 leagues on ESPN and 1 on Yahoo. But out of my ESPN leagues, I would say I have a league that Aaron Rodgers is my starting QB, and then my weapons are Godwin, Kupp, Allen, Eckler, and Jonathan Taylor. I mean, when I was drafting, I wasn't super excited about it because I just feel like I took Taylor too early. But yet, I mean, just the way he played last year, if he can stay healthy, I mean, Indy's going to have to run the ball. I mean, Wentz isn't fully healthy. I mean, I think he's going to play. Is he supposed to play for week 1? He's supposed to play, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe he was supposed to play. But, I mean, he's still not – he's probably like 95%. But still, I mean, they're going to have to run the ball more than they probably want to. And I have Darrell Henderson, who's RB1. I have a Jarvis Landry. I mean, I have some really good players on this roster. But, I mean, just like this – I have my 2 other teams are more heavy set. Like one's wide receiver heavy. The other one's more running back heavy. And this one's more centered. And I think most of my players in this league are more and just above average guys that will usually produce for you. I mean, they're not going to go off for 30, but they're going to consistently get you what they're projected. So I mean, that's just why I'm pretty confident in this team. What about you, Caleb?
It's kind of a tough debate. I have 3 teams. One of them's kind of in a joke league, so it's super stacked. So I'm not even going to count that because one guy was drafting Joe Flacco in the 1st round. So needless to say, that team looks good, but also doesn't really matter. For my important leagues, I'm going to give the slight edge to the league that I have with work right now because I just feel like the weapons are really consistent. So I've got Lamar Jackson at quarterback. I got him in the 6th round. There was a run on quarterbacks in the 3rd, and for some reason Lamar didn't go. I have no clue why.
That's really odd.
Kyler went, Aaron Rodgers went, Mahomes, Allen, basically all the other quarterbacks. I think even Brady went in the 3rd round or something, but Lamar was sitting there. And that was already after the injury to J.K. Dobbins. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take him. And now that Gus Edwards is gone, I mean, Lamar is going to be 65, 70% of that running game, I think, in Baltimore. So I'm really feeling good about that. I think his projection is at like 25 points. That might be low, honestly, against Las Vegas. I know that's like crazy, but that might be a low projection if you ask me. Then at running back, I got Aaron Jones. What were you going to say, Colton?
Oh, sorry, I interrupted you. I was saying I have a question. I mean, do you think that's going to make him more susceptible to injury because he's going to be so much of the offense and so much of that is going to be on his shoulders now? He's going to be running the ball a lot.
Yes, but Lamar is one of those few players, because I say this to myself every year. I always tell myself I'm not going to get Lamar. I don't really want Lamar because he's only, 210 pounds, 205 pounds, whatever it is, and I think he's going to get killed. He is just so elusive. Like RG3 was a great runner, but he did not have that wiggle. he was fast in a straight line, but then he still wanted to kind of put his head down and take people on. Same with Cam Newton, more of a big banger between the tackles kind of runner. I mean, Lamar is just putting everyone in a blender constantly. I mean, and you're a Falcons fan. I mean, think about Vic. Did Vic ever really lose games to injury? I mean, not very often, I feel like.
No, not really. I mean, like you said, he was just so fast. I think Vic's speed, Jackson's almost as elusive as Vic, but Vic was just so fast. But yeah, it's kind of similar. Like there's two very special players that are super elusive, could evade many tackles. But I mean, yeah, he was basically the same. He's like 70%. I felt like he's like 75, at least 75% of the offense when he was in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I mean, he carried them.
The danger for Lamar, if you ask me, is actually that he's like slowing down, thinking he's going to get safe, and then he gets blown up like kind of unexpectedly. That's my worry for him. But I think if Lamar knows where tacklers are at, he'll avoid the big hit. I mean, I've never seen Lamar get hit hard, which is something I don't think I can say for any other player. So,
yeah, I mean, there's very few players that don't take hits. I feel like, well, obviously Josh Allen does because he runs the ball so much. But I mean, yeah there's not many. I mean, a lot of players will get down, but
James White didn't for scat back for New England. He could avoid. That was always impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean, he runs a lot harder than weighing like 195, however much he weighs. He runs like he's like 230. I mean, he doesn't run over people, but he's pretty durable.
Mm-hmm. So I got Lamar Jackson at quarterback. I got Aaron Jones. He was my first round pick. I don't love that, honestly, because I feel like AJ Dillon's going to be involved a lot more in the offense than people realize. But he's fairly durable and he has a high volume, and I think that'll work out okay. My running back too, I'm not sure if I should be really excited about or worried. I got Deandre Swift in the 4th round. I feel really good about that in one sense because I think that he should be most of the offense for Detroit. Detroit just doesn't have that many weapons, and Swift was averaging like 5 catches last year when he was in a definite committee with Adrian Peterson and the other guy from Auburn. Yeah, carry on. So I think that as long as he's healthy, but there are some concerns that he's not going to be healthy. So I'll have to see about that. Then at wide receiver, I got Stephon Diggs as my starter. I don't think he really needs any introduction. Then my wide receiver 2 is McLaurin. I mean, wide receiver 1 and 2 of Stephon Diggs and McLaurin in a PPR league is hard to beat.
Yeah.
That was that. I got McLaurin in the 3rd round because I didn't take quarterbacks in the 3rd round. So ending up with Lamar, even though I didn't take a quarterback until the 6th, was like a huge consolation prize for me. Tight end, I think is boom or bust. I got Goddard from the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he can be really good. It's just, is Ertz going to get traded? Is Goddard going to stay healthy this year? I feel like he'll be good though. I think that I heard that he and Hurts had a good rapport in camp. So I think that Ertz will get kind of phased out a little bit more and Goddard will be catching more passes. My flex is kind of up in the air right now. Currently I have T Higgins in it, and he's probably the guy that I think is a steal. I got him in the 7th, and I think T Higgins could be top 20 wide receiver, top 25, depending on how Burrow does. Because if Jamar Chase keeps dropping balls, then that puts T Higgins at wide receiver 1, and everyone forgets Higgins is only 22 years old. I mean, he has a lot of room to grow. My defense is the Washington football team. I think they're one of the best defenses in the NFL, if not the best. And then my kicker, I'm just going to stream kickers on a weekly basis. But what I feel good about is my bench. I just feel like has a lot of depth. I have Cortland Sutton on my bench. I feel like he could be starting for a lot of people as either a flex or wide receiver 2. I got Leonard Fournette. I think that was a good pick because after seeing how it worked out in week 1 when they didn't even run the ball much, Ronald Jones fumbled the ball in one of the few chances he had. I feel like Bruce Arians is not going to be good with those kinds of mistakes. And I think Fournette, because he's so much more reliable with carrying the ball, he's going to turn into a running back 1 by the end of the year. That's my spicy take, I guess, is that Leonard Fournette will be, he'll actually be like an RB2 kind of flex play by the end of the year reliably. Then I got Trey Sermon. I think I got him in round 11 or 12. I think eventually he'll take over for Raheem Mostert. You don't draft a guy in the 3rd round for no reason. Then I got Jacoby Myers from New England, and that was before everyone knew that it was going to be Mac Jones. So with Mac Jones actually running like a traditional offense, Jacoby Myers is wide receiver 1 getting him in the 12th round or the 13th round is pretty good value for that. And I got Justin Fields. I think that he could be someone that could be a good play later at the end of the year. I got Tevin Coleman, kind of an early start of the year kind of guy to see if I want to throw him in there and see what his usage is. And then because I'm a Packers fan, I put Marquez Valdez-Scantling on the bench because he had a really good camp, and I think that he could become like the Packers' actual number 2 wide receiver. He could get close to 1,000 yards if he can just not drop the ball. So I feel good about that team.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good squad. I mean, it's really nice having a good bench because, I mean, injuries obviously do happen, and it's not safe. You just cover your bench and have like RB2, my receiver 2s. I mean, it's just kind of nice. Like I have a lot of my bench. I have actually Henderson, I think, on almost all my benches, and like Cole Beasley, like Dylan, Jarvis Landry, like players like that, like players that can be used as flexes on starters. Like you said, Cortland Sutton. I had Cortland Sutton on all my teams last year, but he tore his ACL like the second week of the season. So yeah, he's also one of the players that can shine any moment.
I feel like, and that's the other thing is a lot of people I've noticed they try and load up on having their bye weeks all in 1 week. So you kind of like guarantee yourself a loss for like 2 weeks, maybe a year. But then other than that, you're playing all your starters. I don't really believe in that because I feel like you're limiting your potential by only putting them into certain bye week slots. So I just kind of let the bye weeks fall as they may, as long as I'm not like putting 5 players into the same one. So it's important to me to have a deep bench because otherwise I might be playing someone who has like absolutely no one that's not in their starting lineup. They might have all their normal starters in that week. So I need to be able to bring people off my bench and I'm not giving up like 10 points in a spread. So.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I try to do too. Like make sure not all my players have the same bye week. I mean, if 1 or 2 have the same bye week, that's okay. But if you have like 3 or 4 of your starters out, you don't want to really give up on that one game. Could have been the difference between you making the playoffs. I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
For me, my thing with that is I always just make sure that the positions line up. Make sure I don't go over the top with the same bye week with the same position. At least so I can alternate guys in and out from the starting lineup at that position. Because the thing is, for me, I really load up on running backs and receivers from my bench. Like I'll have a good 5, 6 receivers and running backs on the roster, and I'll go get a tight end out of waiver wire or defense or kicker, or quarterback or whatever. But yeah, so last thing for the podcast today is we're going to get into just some NFL news and the upset. The main news for the week was kind of the Gus Edwards stuff, where I feel apparently the Ravens training team is just deciding to tear everyone's ACLs out of nowhere. Like half the freaking team seems like they're tearing their ACLs.
I had defensive back towards ACL. He used to play, Marcus Peters, I believe.
Peters, yeah.
Dobbins, Edwards, and Peters all torn their ACL in the last 2 weeks. So they went out and got Devontae Freeman, Le'Veon Bell, and Latavius Murray. That we'll see how that hands up.
It's a 2016 All-Star team right there, running back.
Oh yeah, if it was 5 years ago, they'd be amazing.
K-Train was a stud in 2017 after Dabble went out, but yeah. Exactly. So that was just the main news from the week. I mean, obviously we already talked about the Buccaneers Cowboys game. Cowboys definitely better than I thought they were going to, but Buccaneers did pull it out. But getting to these games, what's the game you're most excited for? What's the game that you are? I mean, minus our own teams, as we're all excited for our own special. Yeah. And what do you think is the biggest upset? For me, I am probably most excited about Browns Chiefs. I think that's going to be a potential AFC Championship game preview. That's going to be an insane atmosphere in Kansas City, which is obviously one of the best home field advantages in the league. And if I have to go to the upset, I'm kind of between 2. I am going to say my big upset, this is crazy, I know. I think Chicago goes into Los Angeles and upsets the Rams in Sunday Night Football. Because all the hype around the Rams this year, I can see that being an upset. I mean, Andy Dalton's not good, but he's steady. And then you never know what you're going to get from the Rams. I understand Stafford's better than Goff. I get that. He's so much better than Goff. But who knows? I mean, Stafford's always struggled with the Bears in Detroit. I mean, if you look at his stats against Chicago, they've never been the greatest in the world. So maybe he continues to struggle in LA. And with it being week 1, anything's possible. I mean, a couple of years ago, I think it was the Raiders started out like 3-0 and they ended up like with 5 wins. So, I mean, anything can happen early in the season. I mean, obviously, I'm excited for the Vikings-Bengals game, but I think I would probably say Browns-Chiefs is a game that I think everyone's eyes are going to be tuned to. And then
that's a game of the year candidate right off the start. I mean, yeah.
Mm.
Could be the only time we see all these teams healthy too. You know, you don't think about that too much, but by the time teams started playing each other in the playoffs, you're talking about, 17 weeks of attrition. A lot of times it's not the same team at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate how you get to see, I appreciate when they have big games in week 1 because it allows you to see your team at its strength versus their team at their strength.
Mm-hmm.
So
Unless you're
I mean, definitely the Browns and Chiefs. I mean, it's a rematch of the divisional round last year where if Chad Henne didn't make a miraculous run on 3rd and 15, they wouldn't have had a chance to get that 4th down and win the game. And Baker and the offense were hot. So, I mean, they had a chance to go march down the field when Mahomes was hurt and win the game. But, yeah, I think this is going to be a good game. That's going to it could, like you said, potentially be game of the year. I mean, for me, were you done talking, Elijah?
Yeah.
All right. For me, I think the game of the week, in my opinion, is kind of more like an underrated game, is the Titans and the Cardinals. I mean, I think both teams have a chance. I mean, I think Titans can go a little further than Cardinals, but I still think granted, Arizona is in the toughest division in football. I mean, you have the Rams, the Seahawks, the Niners, and the New York Cardinals. But, I mean, I'm just excited to see what the Titans are going to do without their old offensive coordinator. What they're going to do with Julio Jones now. On the other side, A.J. Brown. Like we said, I mean, Julio's 32 now, but he's still Julio Jones. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see that matchup. Kyler Murray, I mean, they have A.J. Green now. He's a little older now as well, but, I mean, he's still – I'm sure he still has a lot of some sort of productivity behind D-Hop and Christian Kirk. And Rondale Moore, in my opinion, is another one of the rookies I think is really good this season.
Yeah, he's super slept on.
Yeah, I think he's a sleeper in my opinion. I think he's going to be that good maybe by the end of the year. And then my upset pick, maybe like slightly spicy. It's nothing crazy, but I think the Dolphins are going to beat the Patriots in week 1. I think Tua is going to go to Foxborough, and the hype of Mac Jones is not going to look that great in game 1. Granted, I think the Patriots are going to be solid this year. I mean, I think that they can probably make a wild card to Mac Jones, but I think the Dolphins are a solid team as well. I think they're pretty slept on. So that's my upset of the week.
I agree with that pick.
I'm going to pull one. I mean, I guess we're kind of going on the NFC West train here. I think Seahawks versus Colts is going to be a really good game. I mean, that could be, depending on whether you believe Wentz will come back and be any kind of quarterback like he was before last year. If Wentz can look like 85-90% of what he was before, or maybe get back to normal, the Colts are a really good team. I mean, they could challenge Tennessee for that division if Wentz actually plays well. And Seattle, obviously, there's a really good team there in the West. They have questions on defense and stuff, but that offense is electric. This could have playoff implications already because I could see these teams fighting for like a 6th or a 7th seed for wild card, and this could be like a tiebreaker. Wouldn't surprise me at all. I think that'll be a really good game. And the other important thing is everyone's picking the Seahawks, but it is in Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, so that's a big deal. That's a lot of noise there. Lucas Oil is known for being hard to play in, so.
It's their first full capacity game in 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's going to be pretty energetic. I mean, just being back in full capacity, like today was I already said earlier, but it was my first time being out of Georgia in 2 years. I mean, granted they're playing UAB, but it was still a crazy atmosphere to start the game. I mean, that's going to be the same for the Colts. They're going to have probably like a 3 or 4 point home field advantage. I mean, going that game at least.
Yeah. Everyone's acting like, I mean, the score predictions I've seen have Seattle winning by at least 7. So I'm a little surprised by that. I feel like it's going to be one of those games that'll go down to the final 3 minutes on a field goal.
Yeah, right now it's Seattle by 3. So that's the line on ESPN at least.
Yeah. I was also going to take Miami over New England for my upset, so I had to scramble. I mean, I'll do kind of a quick one and then my actual one. So a quick one that I think would be interesting and that I thought about a little bit. I could see the Jets coming in and surprising the Panthers. I'm really high on the Panthers, but Darnold strikes me as the kind of guy who could come out really hot right at the beginning, kind of firing all over the place. Carolina maybe isn't really expecting to play a Jets team that's as revamped and fired up as they are. I mean, I think Carolina will probably win, but I think that game will be a lot closer than people will expect. And then my actual one, but this is kind of piggybacking off Elijah. I think the Browns will beat the Chiefs. I don't know if that's spicy or not because it's it's a close game. Yeah, it spreads -6 right now on NFL.com.
I think it's just I think the main reason it's spicy is just because I don't think it's that crazy of a take, because I think that the Browns are that good. But I think there's just a lot of, I feel like a lot of the sports media, the other sports media has kind of, the whole Freddie Kitchens year kind of got the Browns hype like not as high as it should be.
Yeah.
And they've consistently gotten better every single year. And I love their offseason this year too.
Well, and everyone's just acting like Kansas City is like nothing's changed this offseason. I mean, yes, I would argue they probably upgraded a few spots along that offensive line, like bringing in Orlando Brown Jr. and stuff. But I mean, that line has to gel together. That's not easy to do. When you're talking about the Browns are rocking Myles Garrett on one side and Jadeveon Clowney on the other. I mean, Clowney's not the best pass rusher ever, but he's now their number 2 pass rusher. And I think that Clowney going up against like guards and tackles one-on-one, I could see that being a huge issue. Sure. And people are acting like losing Sammy Watkins is a big deal. I mean, Watkins never was the kind of guy who was getting 100 yards or anything all over the place for Kansas City, but he consistently was a third down chain mover. And without that, I think you lose some of that consistency. I don't think Mecole Hardman is going to be as reliable as Sammy Watkins was. So, and my last note on it, the Browns were even admitting it. They said that they were going to be starting Owusu Koromora for like 60 to 70% of snaps as like a nickel backer because they want him matched up on Kelsey. That's going to be amazing. I cannot wait to watch that. I'd love to see a film breakdown someone does on that matchup after week 1.
I mean, Cleveland, I think is legit. Like I have Cleveland going to the AFC Championship in my mind. I mean, I think that's what I think that's what I picked my preseason.
I put them in the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're going to be that good. I mean, I think Baker is really taking the next step again this season.
Well, guys, it was a good conversation. Last but not least, I want to say prayers and for all the families that were affected by 9/11 20 years ago today. Just horrible tragedy. And I do pray that same bonding as a country that took place from the circumstances would come back soon, because that was, as horrible as the situation was, it was awesome as a country to come together. And the cool thing was, as a Braves fan, they were in the game in New York the week after 9/11 happened. And it was kind of the thing that kind of started healing the country.
Yeah, for anyone that's interested, if they haven't watched it, NFL Network had a really good NFL 360 about it. It was very, very moving and interesting to watch. So I'd recommend going and watching that if you can get a hold of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really something as a country we can never forget. And like Elijah said, I mean, regardless of what party someone votes for, I mean, it's just, I mean, we're all Americans at the end of the day. It's just, it's nice seeing unity like that, how everyone's really unified with 9/11 for a while. I mean, if we can just have that sense of unity again, that'd be nice.
Well, guys, hope to see you back next week. And I'm excited to start getting to the actual NFL season. Next episode, we'll be talking about some recap of the NFL stuff, and then we'll kind of start giving some early MVP votes, some way too early MVP votes, I should say.
Way too early. Spicy MVP votes.
Spicy MVP votes. All right, guys. Talk to you later. Thank you all.
Peace.
Peace.